Hey, it's good to hear from you too. Thanks so much for taking this call. I think it was one of the best writing weeks I've had in a little while. I did this video for my YouTube channel on Monday where I set my intentions, set my goals. And one thing I did was kind of lower my expectations for myself on the week. I had been having really intense, demanding goals about kind of how much I wanted to write every day, how much I wanted to read every day. And this week I totally pulled back and lowered those minimums. I just said, okay, as long as you write every day, that's a win on the writing front. As long as you read one short story a day, that's a win. And honestly, that's what I did. And less got done, sort of, so to speak, but I feel much better about it. And I just today read this insane story by this guy, Thomas Ligotti. I don't know if you know him, but it's kind of bonkers. So I I definitely want to tell you about that. And then I want to tell you about this relative insight that I'm kind of engaging with right now around suggestion and when to get specific with sentences and when to kind of pull back, when to be vague, and how that can generate meaning. So cool week. It was a cool week all around. I can't wait to hear about yours. That's actually something I want to do on my channel, is let people call in and tell me about their writing week. A lot of the people who watch my channel, I think, are other writers. We've got this Discord, and the writers on there are sharp and smart, and they participate in these story clubs that I'm doing on the channel. And so I'm thinking about experimenting with them leaving me voice memos or something and then playing them. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, so I've been working on that Weird Wild West story that I told you about. It's coming along. I feel really good about the precision that it's starting to acquire. It's, last week I think it's I got the sort of the shape, the story, the beginning, middle, end, the characters, and now I'm really digging into the actual lines, feeling the story, getting closer and closer and closer, and just letting the sentences kind of echo around. And yeah, I'll share a couple of them with you and see what you think. But so yeah, it's going good. It's going good. I'm a little nervous because there's that contest that I submitted. It was a Weird Wild West flash fiction contest with Apex Magazine, which is just a horror, sci-fi, speculative fiction mag. I don't know what it specializes in exactly. But anyway, they did this contest for flash fiction, and the woman who's judging it just put out this announcement that the first round of rejections went out in the beginning of the month. And so now I'm oh man, I have a chance. Anyway, I think they release it Monday, so cross your fingers for me. Anyway, so yeah, on the writing front, I just kept working on this story. I think it's finding itself. I'm excited about it. And it just feels good to dig into the lines, like I was saying. And yeah, on the reading front, for the story club, we read a couple. I didn't love the science fiction story this week. It was called The New Overworld. And I think it was just kind of beyond me. And I don't know, it feels like my friend who I do it with, Sarah, she also felt that way, which made me feel a little bit better about it. And then the horror story club, which we do the sci-fi one on Wednesday and the horror one on Thursday. And for the horror story club, we read what was actually an insane story. You should totally check out this collection, even if you're not into horror, which I know you're not such a horror person, but it's called The Dark Descent. It's edited by this guy named David G. Hartwell. And I don't know, it's really cool because it's I feel even if you're not a horror reader, it's such a good survey, and these short stories are so tight. And because it's kind of a best of all time, they kind of, I think, resonate for folks outside the horror genre. I'm really enjoying it. And I think some of the people who are reading it fall into that camp. And the editor gives all this context for each story. So it's cool. I feel I'm learning about the history of horror, which is very cool because I'm reading this other book right now. It's a little denser. It's this theory book I found called The Weird and the Eerie. And I'm just loving reading theory alongside the actual fiction. So, I mean, that's something I want to keep doing. That's a takeaway from this week. Yeah, what else I got for you? This like specific insight or kind of like question that I've really started to engage with, which I credit all these stories that I'm reading, is this idea of when to get specific and when to get vague, and the different kinds of meaning that you create from that. Like traditionally it's like specificity gives you credibility and, whatever, right? Specific. That is like the kind of general rule of thumb. God is in the details type thing. But what I keep finding in these short stories that I'm reading is that there is sometimes this like suggestion can be really powerful. And when the exact nature is actually withheld, sometimes I feel more. So here we go. So he's in this shop, this kind of antique shop, shopping around, and he goes through this list of stuff that he finds. Cockeyed bookcases, broken toys, old furniture, standing ashtrays late of some hotel lobby, and a hodgepodge of items that seemed entirely inscrutable in their origin and purpose. So it's like at the end of that sentence, it gets vague. All those like prior images are specific and concrete and give us a clear image. But then this hodgepodge of items that seemed entirely inscrutable in their origin and purpose. By throwing in that stuff about inscrutable in the origin and purpose, it's like all of a sudden the concreteness goes to abstraction. And so I was like kind of messing around with this in my new Weird Wild West story that I'm writing, and this is what I found. Okay, so like I want to hear what you think. Context is that there's a snake that people are scared of, and the reason why they're scared of this snake is because other snake stuff has happened. There's still a generation of folk who remember what the Rattler Witch did to that kid in Cheyenne. Okay, so that's like one version. And then I decided to see what more specific felt like. There's still a generation of folk who remember what the Rattler Witch did to that kid's face in Cheyenne. And then I experimented with like an even more general version. There's still a generation of folk who remember what that Rattler Witch did to Cheyenne Chelsea, who's not explained. So Cheyenne Chelsea is just like a reference, and we're asked to kind of imagine who she is. And, we don't have a specific image of Cheyenne Chelsea, unlike the kid, and we don't have the face. I don't know. What do you think? I like the idea of having like a Cheyenne Chelsea because it kind of gives us a reference to the world in this like imaginative place, and that this is a world where people are named Cheyenne Chelsea, and that asks a certain thing of our imagination. But at the same time, the concreteness of a Rattler Witch doing something to a kid's face is also really appealing. Anyway, so that's like kind of the conundrum I'm in right now, is like when to be general, when to be specific, and how all that works. It's been a very kind of fun project to unpack this. I really want to experiment with this exercise. I've been taking this class from this dude, Stephen Barnes, who's this Afrofuturist short story writer. Well, he wrote a bunch of novels too, but he wrote a bunch of short stories. And he recommends doing this thing where you actually you just get a piece of paper and you write out a story. So you find a writer or a story that you really like and kind of set it in front of you and then copy it out. And I'm just compelled to try that, to try to get a sense of this balance, particularly with writers like Ligotti, or where else have I seen this recently? I mean, even in the Stephen King story that I read recently that was in the Story Club collection, The Reach, there's this similar, when to leave something vague gives a certain kind of world building and a certain kind of resonance. So I think what I'm going to do is experiment with that technique of copying out stories and seeing how that feels. Yeah, so that's the lowdown. That's the download. It really helped to do the live stream Monday video on my channel where I announced my goals. I'm definitely going to try that again next week because it was cool. There's just a couple people who watch the channel who are really there for me, and I appreciate them. And it's like, they're like, yeah, you got this. How cool is that, right? Anyway, I appreciate them so much. So I'm going to try it again on Monday. And this time around, one thing I noticed this week is while I did write every day, I didn't write in the same like time, place. And so that I'm going to try to I think I'm going to talk about that Monday, because I think that's going to be my big idea. My big goal for next week is to kind of reorient the writing conditions so that my best work comes. Overall, I'm really happy with this week because just engaging with the piece every day did really feel like progress. But I think I'm going to write better if I protect the writing circumstance a little bit more. Anyway, yeah. What's up with you?